Hey guys, thank you for stopping by. I'm Kevin from Tranquility Escapes. Today, I just want to go over the three main visits for your pond, which are the spring clean out, which is your drain and clean. You have your fall netting and your winterization. Those are the three most important maintenance visits for your pond. So in this video, I want to go step by step on how to do them yourselves. All right, so we're gonna get right into it. Right now, we're getting ready for the spring clean out, drain and clean. So this is right around that March, April time here on Long Island. The weather's just warming up, the fish are just waking up. We want to make sure this system's clean for the rest of the season to have a good head start. Right out here is basically all the materials we need to do a spring clean out. So starting left to right, we have our components of the pond. So we have our pump, we have our check valve, we have the support racks for our ball falls, skimmer, we have our ball balls. We don't have our ball fall filter mats or skimmer mats because during the winterization on this pond, they were getting kind of worn out, so we threw them out and now we're going to be installing new ones. We have our skimmer basket over here, and then we have some long pair of gloves. So ponds can get really dirty. Most people don't want to be sticking their hand in basically fish poop. It's a lot of muck, so these gloves will keep you clean. Also, the water's still very cold right now, so keeps it clean and dry. We'll need some channel locks or some water pump pliers to basically install some equipment back in. You're gonna need some waders or some overalls. I do muck boots and overalls, it's more comfortable for me. Some people like doing waders. We have a fine mesh skimmer net. We have a coarser one to get bigger stuff. We have our blower. We have our shop vac over here. We have two clean out hoses. Depending on how big your pump is, you'll need more clean out hoses. You might need less. We have our three pumps over here. So Aquascape makes these pumps. We have our LSR and then just an Aquascape clean out pump. I don't think they make these anymore, unfortunately. They're really good. They don't clog up too much. They can handle a lot of debris. You could go to like Home Depot or something and get a clean out pump, but it's going to be really slow and it's going to take forever, constantly getting clogged up. These things push a good amount of water, and we use a couple of these to drain out the pond really quick, as well as basically using some extra water to rinse out the pond quicker. We have our aerator right over here as well. This is going to be supplying the holding tank where the fish are going to be staying for the next few hours with oxygen, so they're going to be totally fine. We have our holding tank here. We have some plant fertilizer. If we're doing the clean out for you, we're fertilizing your lilies and everything. We're also adding some extra potting media to your lilies because the lilies do tend to eat up some soil over the course of the year. So we like to basically trim those lilies up, add some more soil as well as some fertilizer. We have some fittings for our pumps. You'll see why we use that. We have our garden hose over here. We have a larger fish net. We have a koi sock, and then another net that's going to be going over this holding tank because we don't want the fish jumping out. We also have our power washer over here. You don't want something too strong. This one's 2650 PSI. Power washer works perfectly, gets the job done. But this is basically what you're going to need for your spring clean out. So this is a lot of equipment. It can get expensive. We do have holding tanks and pumps and power washers. We're well into the thousands of dollars of equipment just to do a spring clean out. You could get by with cheaper materials, but we do this for a living, so we like to have some nicer things to speed things up. So like I said, you could go with a cheaper pump or something, but it's going to take you a lot longer. Also, if you can get an extra pair of hands, I have Rob helping me today. He's the other owner of Tranquility Escapes. So together, we're going to be cleaning out this pond and we're going to get started. So a few other things you're going to need for spring cleaning is a couple of water treatments. So we have our pond detoxifier, which is great for when we're adding new water in. It's going to make sure those chlorines and chloramines are not in that city water. If you're on well water, you really should be conscious of how much oxygen is in that well water. If it's very stagnant, you're really going to want to aerate that water heavily to make sure those fish are fine. We also have our beneficial bacteria. Depending on the time of the year you're doing a spring clean out, you're going to want to use beneficial bacteria or your cold water bacteria. So if you're in that 40 to 50 degree range, you're going to use your cold water. If you're higher than 50, then you can just go straight to your beneficial bacteria. We also have our sludge eater and then our rapid clear flocculant. So sludge eater just breaks down any little debris that might have been missed during the spring clean out. We try to get every single nook and cranny, but there's sometimes things behind the rocks or just areas that you can't get to. So that will help us break down some stuff. We have our rapid clear flocculant. after we fill up the pond. It's going to be a little bit cloudy. That flocculant is going to let everything basically stick together and float out of suspension to clear up that water faster. And then the last but not least is our thermometer. This is going to be going into our holding tank, and this is super important when we're putting the fish back in, because we have to make sure we acclimate this fish. And the last thing is safety glasses. When you're power washing, you're dealing with a lot of rock that can fragment, small gravel that can bounce around. You don't want that stuff getting in your eyes. We've heard stories of people going blind from power washing. We don't want that to happen to you, so be safe. The pond is also super slippery when dealing with algae on the rocks. So we're gonna start draining out this pond, get this holding tank set up, and we'll go through that process. So Rob got the holding tank set up. These collapsible tanks are really helpful. They fold down to a very small size. We unfold them and we have our net with our clamps on. Before we did this, we actually came in here, rinsed down this pond. I have this sanitizer solution that we use. We basically spray down the whole holding tank, make sure that when we're going from one client to the other client, that if any fish have any diseases or viruses, we don't want that to spread pond to pond. So we basically come in here with a bleach solution. It's very diluted, so it's safe for the fish. Spray down the holding tank, rinse it out, make sure the tank's nice, clean, and sanitized. And then we have our net on. We also have our aerator line ready to go. Now we're gonna just basically drop the pump into the pond, start draining that water into here. We're gonna try to drop the pump closer to the top. That way we're not pulling too much debris. The fish are kind of waking up now and they're stirring up the bottom. So we want to get the cleanest water into that tank so they're not sitting in murky, dirty water for the next few hours. So we're going to take these clean out hoses, drop them in the holding tank. We're also going to take our strap this down, because these hoses tend to kind of fly out of the tank. So now they're secured, we can go plug them in. So now we're gonna keep an eye on this water level, make sure it doesn't get too low too fast. These two pumps will pump out this pond in a couple of minutes. We have our koi sock ready for our smaller fish. We use this koi sock that doesn't hold water. For our larger fish, we'll get a koi sock that does hold water. These fish are pretty small, so we're just gonna use this for this pond, but we're already down to the second shelf, so we're gonna drop the pumps a little deeper, pump that water further down. We're also gonna wait basically to get this pond down to nothing. Almost the fish are like kind of out of water, but they're not, they're totally safe. The reason why we do that is catching a fish in a pond that's full of water, you're never going to catch them. They're just way too fast. So we'll wait till basically they get down to the bottom level, they get trapped. One person will go in the pond, scoop up the fish. The second person will run back and forth to the tank and to the pond. We'll get all the fish safely in that tank, and then we'll start the clean out process. While we're doing this, we're taking out the stuff from winterization. Rob's taking out the de-icer right now. While we're keeping an eye on the pond, we're doing other stuff like taking out the sandpipe out of the skimmer. We use this to blow out the plumbing line during the winter. You'll see that later on in this video. We're also going to take out the caps of the bivalves. So as the pond's getting lower, the fish are going all the way down to the bottom. We're able to kind of start grabbing these fish. So you can see how dirty this pond is. The water's getting really murky right now. So on the holding tank end of things, I'm taking the hose out of the holding tank and throwing it somewhere in the lawn. That way I'm not getting that dirty water in that holding tank. And this is something you guys don't want to rush. It takes a long time getting this fish out. You just want to make sure these fish get out of here nice and safe. You don't want to stress them out too much where they're banging into rocks. Now that we have the pond drained out, we're going to come over to the holding tank, throw this net over. We have our aerator line in here. Fish are getting oxygen, so they'll be fine. We're going to clamp it down basically at all four corners. The reason why we do this is because we want your fish to be safe. Fish tend to jump, especially when they're stressed. So when you put them in a new environment like this and you don't net it, you're guaranteed to almost have one or two fish jump overboard. And if you're not vigilant, you might have a dead fish on your hand. So we don't want that to happen, not on our watch. So that's why we tend to net all of our tanks. Now we're going to get the pressure washer set up and start power washing this. All right guys, so power washer set up. I'm starting top to bottom. We don't want to start at the bottom, work our way up, and then basically get everything filthy again. So we're going to start at the highest point up, power wash all the way down. I have our clean out pump running at the bottom of the pond right now. That's going to stay on basically the whole time. I have my overalls, I have my muck boots on. It's going to get very messy. There's going to be basically sludge splattering everywhere. By the end, I'm going to be covered in basically a lot of disgusting things. But we're going to get this pond all power washed up. You're going to see a transformation in just about like an hour. So now we have the pond pressure washed. You can see everything looks a lot better already. So we got a lot of like 90% of the debris kind of out of here. It is not clean. It's just removing that thick layer of algae that's growing on the rocks and getting the color back in the rocks. We're not looking for perfection here. We're looking for like 90%. We don't want to remove almost everything because there is some biofilm on this rocks that is part of the healthy ecosystem. So we're looking for 90% clean. And now we're going to run our hoses. The more hoses you have, the better, the faster this will go, because this is the most time consuming part. If your pond's very filthy, you'll start seeing it. We're going to start taking our hose and going basically inside these boulders, behind the rocks, flushing everything out, flushing out the gravel. And then we're also going to be taking the gravel from the bottom and redistributing. You can see we have some areas up here and over here that the gravel's been falling off of. But basically we're going to remove that gravel, put it back up here. You don't want to be adding more gravel into your pond. You don't have a gravel thief in your pond stealing gravel every year. If you keep doing that, you're going to start building up the bottom layers of gravel too much where it becomes anaerobic and unhealthy for your fish. So if you had enough gravel before, you definitely have enough gravel now. You don't have to keep adding gravel. This pond's a little extra dirty than normal. Most of the ponds aren't this filthy, but this is still a small pond. It's like about an 8 by 11, but the fish load in this pond is way too much for what it is. There's about 40 fish inside this pond, some of them larger, some of them smaller. There shouldn't be that many fish in this pond. So if you have a scenario like this, you may have to start upgrading your filters. This is a 2,500 gallon filter. The pond's under 1,000 gallons. So it's suitable for a couple fish, but nothing like what this pond has. You can start seeing how much fish is in this pond. We have a good amount floating in. The water is a little murky, and that's why we try to keep this water as clean as we can, because the fish are going to be staying in here for a few hours. So that's why we got to the bottom of the pond. I took the hose out. That way it stays relatively clean. But we have some fish that are probably 18 inches, and then there's about 40 something in here. So way too many fish for this pond. So if you're running into that scenario, you may need to do more frequent cleanings or upgrade your filtration system. It's going to just be more maintenance. Like, this pond is really filthy. Normally it's not like this, but this scenario it is. So one other trade secret, I have basically given you guys all my info. We have a clean out pump in the holding tank. So that's why we try to save as much water as we can. And depending on how big your pond, the more water you'll have. We'll have a couple of these tanks on larger ponds. We have the other end of the pipe. We have a couple of fittings on here, the fern co, and then a reducer on here. And this is going to just reduce the volume of water coming out, increasing the pressure, which is going to give me a lot more water than what a garden hose is going to give me. So doing it like this, I'm going to be able to get all these nooks and crannies really quickly, but I do have to be super mindful of not draining too much water out of that tank. So we're going to turn this on quickly, and you guys will see how much pressure comes out of here. So that's a lot more flow than a garden hose. We're going to clean this pond really quick this way. So a couple people are probably going to be asking, how do I know when it's clean? This is what we're looking for. I can basically stir around this gravel. You might have some fine sediment in here, like sand or silt. That's totally fine, but you want this water when I'm running the hose in to be pretty much clear. And you can see no matter where I go, this water's really not getting stirred up, mucked up. So you know it's clean. If I move the gravel around, you can see the liner down here. It's pretty clean. Out of this stream, I just took out all this debris. You know your pond's still dirty if you're rinsing and you have that brown, black, dirty water coming out, versus over there it's starting to get clean. And this is the same time where if you have liner folds like that, we'll clean up the gravel around the liner and kind of disguise it with some more gravel. Basically, you want to rinse. When your gravel's like that, you're not clean. When you come over here, you can see that water is pristine. So you know the pond's getting cleaner. So at this time, the pond's almost fully cleaned out. Rob's doing the final rinse down. I'm going around doing like our inspection. So this is the time where I'm letting the homeowner know, hey, you have a light out. So right now we have the transformer out. I'm checking the lights in the stream. I pulled this one out. It's still working. I go down here. This light, it's out. So this pond's a couple years old. The lights, you're submersing lights in water. I mean, they're the best lights you can probably get on the market. They're LED, but you're submersing electronic in the water. They do tend to fail sometimes. So right now I'm gonna let the homeowner know if they want to swap it out. This is probably the best time to do it because we don't have to come back at a later date, drain the pond, get in here. The pond's already drained. We're cleaning it already. So let's get this light out and install a new one. At the same time, we're gonna go around to these edges where the liner's popping up, where these folds are. We're gonna hide them again. And we're basically just gonna address any little issues. If you want something to be repaired or altered on your pond, this is probably the time to do it because, like I said, we have access to everything right now. The pond, we're still cleaning it out. Fish are out, the pond's drained. This is the time to do it. You wanna swap out a light in the future during the season and the light's all the way at the bottom. It's just a lot harder for us to get to that light. It takes a lot more time, and if it takes a lot more time, it's gonna cost a little bit more money. So if you wanna stay on the lowest possible end of the budget, do it now while we have the pond drained. It's the best time to do it. But basically, we're gonna start doing the final rinse down and get this pond filled up. We're gonna go through the acclimation process for the fish, get the pump and filter hooked up, and then get this pond ready for the season. All right, guys, as the pond's filling up, we're gonna move on to the skimmer and get this pump reinstalled. If you cleaned it out during the winterization and stored it inside, you don't have to clean the stuff again. The pump's all clean, the check valve works, everything's ready to go. The skimmer's now cleaned out with the spring clean out. So we're gonna get to reinstalling everything in here. So we have our check valve right here. We're gonna wanna disconnect this union. I like to throw a little Teflon tape so this doesn't leak out. It's not really a big deal if it leaks because everything's inside the skimmer, but I don't want it spraying around. So we're gonna screw it into the bulkhead. I like to go hand tight for this. You can take the channel locks and go maybe half a turn, but you don't want to go too tight to break the bulkhead. And this is a good time to check your bulkheads too. If you see this gasket here, this is what keeps it waterproof. If this gasket is pulled away or something, or it seems loose, it'd be a good idea to let us know, or if it'd be the time to kind of replace those bulkheads. Now we're going to take the other end of the check valve, screw this onto the pump. And these pumps have little O-rings right here. It'd be a good idea to check that yours is still in there so this thing doesn't leak. This tray can be a little tricky to get in. You have these two little prongs at the bottom of the skimmer door you have to get underneath. Get that in there. And you're gonna want to get this pump in here, connect it to this union, and this will go hand tight. So now the pump's in, we're gonna install a skimmer mat. These have a hole with an opening. This goes right around that check valve. It's nice and tight. The wire comes out of here. If you have an autodoser, this is the time where you'd put it in the skimmer. Now we're going to reinstall our autodoser. So we have this little strap that comes with the older style autodosers. This is what we use to make sure the line stays in the skimmer. But basically this wraps around here, gets tied in. And now this is the other end of the auto doser. We're gonna snap this in. That way we know our treatments are going into the pond. And then the skimmer's all hooked up. And now that we have that auto doser in, we're just gonna come in with our skimmer basket. There's two little prongs. You can see these little square holes. Those are gonna go right on top and over. If you adjusted your skimmer door, you're gonna have to readjust it. This really shouldn't be moved unless you know what you're doing. This can kind of mess up with the water level inside your skimmer. This pond has the overflow set at the max, so I'm gonna set the door at the top. But your skimmer's ready to go. You can just put the lid back on. And that's all set. Right next to the skimmer is where we normally install our auto dosers. We have the whole dugout here from the last winterization. It stayed open, thankfully. Otherwise, you have to dig it out. If you have the new style dosers, the XT or the SLs, the installation is going to be pretty much the same. You could follow the manual to hook it up. But we're going to just take the casing in here, put this in the ground. There's actually a line that you don't want to bury above, so we're going to keep it right at that line. So we're going to grab our treatment. We typically use Maintain for ponds. Depending on the situation, you may need a different formula, but we're gonna take the cap off. Depending on the auto doser you have, if you have the new one, you're taking off both the caps. If you have this older style, you're only taking off the top cap. Now that you have the cap unscrewed, you're going to want to take this adapter that comes with the auto doser normally, and this goes into the tubing here. And this one will drop into the bottle and actually screw closed. Gonna drop the bottle in, close this. Now it's closed up. Take the one that runs from the skimmer that we just hooked up on the check valve, push it in here. Okay, set to go. We're gonna plug it in. So we have the auto doser right here. Just wiped off the surface, cleaned it up. We're gonna set this auto doser to 1,000 gallons. You can see that green light there. We have the power. If you ever have cloudy water, you kind of hit that X2 doser. It gives a double dose every day. We're just starting up right here. But every time you put a new bag in, you just want to hold down this X2 button, and you'll see that dosing will start flashing orange. That is priming the bag, getting the air out of the bag. And then if you watch this hose right down here, this will start dripping in about a few minutes. Looking for that visual inspection, you see right there, that dripping is that automatic dosing system priming. So that's what you want to see. If you don't see that, something's going on with your doser. You're going to want to check into that. So now the pond's filling up. We're still halfway through. We're going to get the lilies out of the holding tank where they were sitting. And Rob's gonna start putting the lilies back in the pond.
All right guys, so we have potted our lilies. If you wanna come over here and see what this gravel looks like, this is what we use at the Pond Stone. It's got beautiful tans, grays, blues, different sizes. It looks very natural, and this is what it looks like washed off and rinsed off. So we got that, and now time to show you guys how to put this in here. So remember, there's about 40 pounds of aquatic soil here and some gravel. It can be heavy, so carefully get into the pond and do this. Like right now it's easier while the pond is filling, obviously, but when you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it nice and slow, tilt it, and see that sediment rising. That's just the aquatic soil. That'll clear out, but you wanna go nice and slow. You want to get any air bubbles that are stuck in there. And that's it. Now you have lilies in your pond, and enjoy the blossoms.
All right guys, the pond's almost filled up. We have our fish in a holding tank still. What we're going to do is take a temperature of this tank. So while we've been sitting here, we have a thermometer inside this tank. It's been sitting the whole time we've been doing the clean out, so the water temp is just about 50 degrees. We're gonna go to the pond, drop this in. We're gonna let that sit for a couple minutes, let that thermometer accurately read the water temperature, and then we're gonna look, see what it says, and see if we're ready to acclimate the fish. All right, so we just took the thermometer out of the pond and we're at 50 degrees, so there is no difference between this pond water and the city water, which is why we like to do our spring cleanouts in the early spring, late fall. That way, that tap water that's coming out of the spigot is the same temp as our pond. Everything's cold. If we were to do this clean out midsummer and this pond water is 70, 80 degrees and that city water is 40, 50 degrees, you're gonna kill your fish. So you don't wanna do that. So right now we're gonna put our water treatments in our pond. We're gonna put a dechlorinator, a detoxifier. We're gonna put our pond starter bacteria in there and do all of the water treatments we need. We have our auto doser also primed, so we're getting additional water treatments. But the acclimation process is super important. It really depends on the type of fish you have. The larger the fish, the more sensitive they are to temperature changes. You don't wanna mess this up. If you have well water, there are things you need to look into doing, like aerating the water if it doesn't have oxygen in it. This is something you wanna get knowledgeable about and learn a little bit about the fish. The rule of thumb is you just want to be a couple degrees off at most. Anything more than that, you really don't want to be putting the fish into that water if it's off by a couple degrees. And once again, it really depends on the fish. You have to kind of learn about what type of fish you have. Not every fish is going to be the same. Not every pond's going to be the same. So this is where you want to be super careful, knowledgeable, and kind of read up on this. In our case, the pond and this holding tank are perfectly the same temperature, so that's best case scenario. We're gonna get this fish into the pond. All right, so we just put our detoxifiers, all of our water treatments in the pond. You're gonna have to go to the bottle. They have dosing calculations, and you're gonna have to find out how many gallons your pond is and how much water treatment you have to put in. That's gonna be totally different from each pond. There's a lot of calculators online that you can use to find the gallonage of your pond, as well as each treatment should have on the back of the bottle with a label of calculations. But we're gonna start taking out these fish one by one. We're gonna have to start draining out this tank to get some water out of here because these fish are gonna be super elusive with how much water is in here. So we're gonna start pumping some water out and catching these fish and putting them in the pond. So we have the pond filled up. We have all 40 fish in here. It's hard to believe there's 40 fish in here, but there's a lot of babies in here. We have our 2 lilies in here. All the liner edges are hidden. We installed a bunch of new lights that were out. We trimmed all the aquatic plants out. We have the skimmer over here that's fully cleaned out. We have the biofalls up there that's cleaned out. And all that's left is to turn this on. The water is a little cloudy from just its brand new city water. It always has this blue cloudy tinge to it, and it's any fine silt that's still in the pond. We're striving to get 99% of it. It's impossible to get 100% of this cleaned out. By tomorrow, this thing will be gin clear, so we'll catch you guys in the morning. And we're back. It's the next day. It's probably only been 12 hours since we left this clean out, and you can see this water is already cleared up a lot more, and all the fish are super active. They look super healthy, and that is one thing we do while we're transferring the fish. We're actually looking at every single fish, making sure they have no ulcerations on them, any fungal infections, and if they do, we're letting the homeowner know. But this pond cleared up amazing, and what a transformation this was from when we started. All right, guys, that's it for the spring clean out. We are done. We just finished cleaning up. We're gonna head on out. If you guys have any questions about spring cleanouts, please drop a comment down below and we'll try to get to any questions you guys have. And if you guys are in that Long Island region and don't want to tackle this yourself, which I understand this can be a weekend project for someone, and depending on how big your pond is, it can be overwhelming to tackle. So if you guys want us to handle everything for you, you guys can head over to our website, tranquilityscapes.com, or give us a call at 516-559-0803, and we'd be more than happy to help you.